Good afternoon, everybody. This is Bonnie Vandermeulen, Training Coordinator for Wisconsin Facets. On behalf of our entire Wisconsin Facet staff, I'd like to thank you for joining us today. Our webinar today is entitled One Size Doesn't Fit All, Family Engagement in the IEP Process. Our presenter today is Sherry Silla. Sherry is the Family Engagement Coordinator for the Wisconsin Statewide Parent Educator Initiative, WISPE, in the CISA 1 area. She has over 16 years of experience in the role of helping families who have a child with a disability and school staff who work with them. She is a parent of 4 adult sons, one of whom has an intellectual disability. It is my honor today to introduce to you Sherry Silla. Sherry?
Thanks, Bonnie. I am thrilled to be here today and looking forward to our time together today. As I go through the presentation, I encourage participants on the webinar to ask questions along the way. And if as we're going through, no questions have been asked, I will stop about midway through and give people an opportunity to, or for Bonnie to ask any of the questions that have been submitted through the chat. So, all right, so our topic is One Size Doesn't Fit All, Family Engagement in the IEP Process. So the IEP process is about who the team members are, how they interact with each other, and how they make decisions, and eventually how they come to agreement about a child's education program. What I will discuss today is the important role of families and how important that role is in the IEP process. Families' contributions are critical, but at the same time, very unique to each student and family situation. So as I walk through this presentation, several examples will be shared to show how one size doesn't fit all. All right, so our objectives for today are, number one, we'll just familiarize ourselves and review the 5 beliefs in the 5-step IEP process. Number 2, identify strategies for building positive relationships. And finally, number 3, I'm going to share with you how to access and use some of the family engagement resources for the IEP process and IEP meetings. So we're going to start here with the 5 core beliefs. The 5 core beliefs are essential for developing IEPs that promote college and career readiness. And college and career readiness is for all students. So just to be clear, it's for students as young as our 3-year-olds up until 21. So our college and career IEP process and the 5 beliefs are for any students receiving educational services in from the age of 3 through 21. The 5 core beliefs incorporate the most important aspects of engagement between educators and families. Consistent practice of these beliefs will enable families and schools to build a strong foundation for success. Districts and IEP teams should consider and discuss these beliefs. If you'd like to learn more about the 5 beliefs, I'm not going to go into it today, but there is a link at the bottom here, the CCR IEP 5 beliefs. So you can check out the DPI website for more information. So now, just to review the 5-step process of college and career ready IEPs, it's relatively easy to remember the 5 steps using the verbs as reminders. If you think about understand, achievement, identify the effects of the disability, develop the goals, align services, and analyze progress. Sometimes some of our educators or school staff, as they're facilitating an IEP meeting, may actually use these 5 steps as part of the agenda that they use in an IEP team meeting. So this process is intended to be a cyclical process that IEP teams use to assist in planning future services and supports for the student. To review just briefly each one of these steps, understand achievement of grade level academic standards and functional expectations to identify the student's unique needs, strengths. Number two, we look to identify how the student's disability affects academic achievement and functional performance. Next, we develop ambitious and achievable goals that close the achievement gaps and support the unique strengths and needs of the student. Then we move on to aligning services, and that means aligning specially designed instruction, services, supports, and accommodations needed to support the goals and ensure access to the general curriculum, and finally, to analyze progress toward goals to evaluate what works and what is needed to close the students' achievement gaps. So in step one, the present level of achievement must have sufficient information to establish a baseline used to develop annual goals. So we want to describe the student's strengths and interests first. And this could include how the child is performing in the classroom, at school, and outside the school from an academic standpoint, when we're talking about academic skills, as well as communication skills, social skills, and interests. We also have to develop a summary of performance in academic content areas. So those are sources of information that could include district-wide and classroom assessments, rubrics, and screeners. So this information is used as that baseline information. And oftentimes when we're thinking about the little ones, preschoolers, we think about knowledge and skills such as early language development, communication and literacy, cognition, and general knowledge. We also have to take a look at their present level of functional performance. And so what that means is functional performance includes activities and non-academic skills needed for independence, access to instruction and performance at school, in the home, in the community, for leisure time, and for post-secondary and lifelong learning. Some of those things that we might be looking at are daily living skills and social skills. Oftentimes we want to take a look at what is the observed behavior that we see occurring in the student on a daily in a daily perspective. And then for preschoolers, we're looking at positive social emotional skills, appropriate behaviors to meet their needs, and the acquisition and use of knowledge and skills, including early language and communication. We also need to be including in this information when we talk about present level is the present level of concerns of the parent and or family. And this is really an important role that families play in this particular step, because up until this point, a lot of what's included in the present level is coming from school staff. But families, when you think about outside of school, what we notice and what we identify as our child's unique needs, as well as some of our the child's struggles, is really important information to be included. So when at the IEP team meeting, parents will be asked if they have any concerns. This may include concerns about their students' reading achievement or language and communication. If for little ones, early literacy skills, social emotional needs, sensory needs, behavior, or even talking about the child's future as far as will they go to college? Will they be able to hold a job or live on their own one day? There's also an area in this in the IEP where the student can express and write their concerns as well. So students will be given the opportunity to share any concerns they have about their education. Oftentimes children may say nothing. They could also be able, this could be also a really nice opportunity for students to self-advocate and state things that they'd like to do or wish they could do. So we have a couple of resources that are linked onto this, this slide. I'm going to right now take you to our live binder. And this is a resource that I shared the link with Bonnie to be included in here. It's also the link to this live binder is on one of our final pages or final slides of this presentation. So this is our resource binder, and instead of sending all these wonderful resources out to you, I thought I would take some time in each one of the steps to kind of show you what's out here and give you some examples of how those particular resources might be used with an individual family and or student. So you'll notice here there's a brochure, the 5 beliefs and the 5-step process. There's information in regard to those, but we have each one of our steps listed in the live binder. So I'm going to open up step 1. Each step opens up to the DPI page. So if you want to learn more about the step 1 process, you can link, you can click on any of the links because this opens up into the DPI webpage. As you go through the live binder on the left-hand side, there are a number of resources. So when we talk about the step 1 process and understanding achievement and how families can be involved in that process, there are some really important resources that are in here that I'd like to share with you at this point. The first one is the Family Student Snapshot. This particular resource is an input form for families before an IEP meeting is held. And this student snapshot is a 2-sided document. And you do not have to, families do not have to answer all the questions. And typically what I've done in the past when I work with a family or I've shared this with school staff, I always emphasize maybe just 3 or 4 questions that are key and critical depending upon where you're at with that family or where the family is at with that child. So for instance, if we were talking about a youngster, maybe an early childhood student, some of the questions on here may be a little too far out for families that have a 3 to 5-year-old to answer. Some of these questions are good for everyone. So describe your child, including information about brothers and sisters. So some general information is something that could be used and shared at an IEP meeting, especially if school staff don't know the family or the student that well. Information like this might be helpful in order for newer staff to get to know the family a little bit better. Second question, highlight the student's strengths. In what areas does your child do well, such as classes, activities, in or out of school, playing and interacting with other children? Third question, because all of our IEPs must address reading, question 3 is something that I consider a standard question that I encourage all families and all educators to encourage families to talk about. Reading is a focus in our state, and so describing the child's reading interests, what does he or she like to read, and then have there been changes since the last time we met? Because there must be a statement in the IEP in regard to reading. This is a key and critical question. Question 4, proud moments. We want to celebrate those things that have worked, that have been successes and accomplishments, because we want to emphasize the positive, the strengths, the successes of that student, because oftentimes we can use those strengths and accomplishments and successes as leveraging what maybe some of the unique needs of the child are. So for instance, if the student has a real interest in um, model cars and actually, has gotten really proficient at building model cars, maybe we can use that ability, that interest area, as a way to interest the student in an academic subject or some academic work. We also talk about the greatest challenges or difficulties. And so this is where it gets to parent concerns, family concerns in the IEP. You'll notice that this form indicates on the IEP where those pieces of information would fit into an IEP. The next question, what has worked in the past to assist and support your child that may be helpful for the school to know about? Families have history, okay? And sometimes that history, when a student moves from grade to grade or from school to school, that history doesn't always transfer with our children. And so having families share what they know has worked in the past for their child may be really helpful for that child's success in the coming year. We also talk about long-term and short-term goals, and sometimes this question after high school, for someone that has a 3 or 5-year-old, that might be hard for them to think about. I'm not saying they shouldn't think about it, because we need to always be thinking about one day our child will grow up to be an adult, and where will they be? But sometimes a question like that might be a little bit more challenging for a family to answer. However, if you had a student or a family and a family of a student who's in middle school or high school, thinking about 5 years from now or after high school, those are key and critical and important questions. That these questions might be more of the focus of some of the questions we would want parents to answer before an IEP meeting, rather than maybe some of the other ones. There's an opportunity for families to talk about any healthcare needs or any other information that they would like to share. What 3 areas or skills would you like your child to learn during the next school year? So we're setting goals. So that's the setting IEP goals section of that IEP process. Question 10, what is the best way to communicate and share resources with your families? We know from research and we know just in general that not all families use technology the same way. Some families have access to the internet, have access to computers at home. Some families do not. Some families have older baby boomer grandparents and older parents that maybe don't use texting and don't use other forms of communication as much as maybe families that are uh, Generation X or our millennial parents. So question 10 is a question that I always encourage families, as well as educators who are using this document, to encourage families to respond to this question, because communication oftentimes is the #1 issue that gets in the way of that positive relationship building. And then finally, what types of things, question 11, could the school do to help our family? So what types of things might you, as a family member, might need or want to connect with in regard to being able to help your child or to help your family? So, so the student snapshot is one form that I think every family should be using, or providing, using that as a way to provide input into the IEP process. We also have the My Snapshot. So for students that are maybe middle school, high school, they have a form very similar to what the student snapshot for families is. So remember, in step 1, there's an opportunity for students to give their input. So again, a 3 or 4 or 5-year-old and early childhood student wouldn't be filling out this form. And perhaps not an elementary student. There might be some elementary students that could and could answer some of these questions. Some might not. But certainly once you get to middle school and high school, this might be something that could be utilized as well. For students that are older, students that are transition age, 14 or older, there's also the Wisconsin Transition app. And I linked the website in here. This is another way that students can prepare for the IEP process, but families can use this as well. The positive student profile is another input form that is very similar to the student snapshot that can be utilized as input into that IEP process. Opening doors to self-determination. This particular resource looks like this. And this is a resource that the Department of Public Instruction developed a number of years ago. And it's essentially a workbook for students that are looking to develop their self-determination skills. So you'll see in here there's a number of informational pieces about after high school and how the rules change, but there's also some opportunities where these sheets could be used for a student to fill out before an IEP meeting as well. All right. And then finally, because as I said before, all of our IEPs are focused on reading and literacy, that there needs to be a statement in there, or if the student doesn't require a reading goal, at a minimum, a statement of where their reading level is at and that they are at grade level. There is a survey if you wanted to focus on reading. There is a survey in regard to reading in here as well. So section 1 has a lot of resources and things like that for family input. And then we finally also do have acronyms. So for families that are new to special education, or even for families that maybe have been around a while, having an acronym list and a frequently used terms list is really can be really beneficial to some families that feel the need to know the correct terms and know the correct terminology and that type of thing. So this might be something you might give out to a family. And then because when we're talking about step 1, academic achievement, some school districts do have parent guides or curriculum guides by grade level. Something like that should be shared with a family so that when we're talking about grade level academics and the standards, that is something that could be shared with some families that may require knowing more or have those questions. If your school district doesn't have that, just know that the National PTA has parents' guides to student success that is by grade level, kindergarten through 8th grade, and then they have a high school level. And these focus on English language arts. So you kind of get an idea by the end of kindergarten what kindergartners are will be working on and should be able to do. It gives tips about how to keep the conversation going with the school. What questions should families ask? It also talks about mathematics and an example or samples of what kindergartners are working on. What do you talk to the school about? And then each one of these has information on how families could help their child at home in regard to English language arts or mathematics. So know that this is a resource as well. So some families may ask, how can I help my child at home with math? This could be someplace that school staff or a parent could access in order to come up with some ideas of how I might be able to help my child at home. We also have Wisconsin Model Early Learning Standards. This is for our little ones. So when we're talking about birth through 5 years old, our little ones, there are early learning standards out here as well. For the real little ones, we have milestone moments. So this talks about what to expect at different ages from 2 months to 5 years. And they talk about social emotional, language communication, cognitive learning, thinking, and problem solving. Also out here are social emotional learning competencies. This is developed by the Department of Public Instruction. So some of our kids that maybe are struggling with some of those social emotional competencies, such as working with groups of other students, or maybe have some anxiety, maybe have some other types of things. This in here might be useful for a student that has that type of need. And then we have 2 videos in here, Rising to High Expectations and a Teacher's Perspective on Setting High Expectations. So that's like our first section. There's a lot of information in here, and depending upon the individual student and the family, you may find certain resources might be better than others. So I'm going to
Sherry,
pause here. Yep, go ahead, Bonnie.
yeah, thank you. There is a participant that was interested again in making sure she knew how to find that site. So if you can just repeat that or maybe restate where you're able to find it.
Yep. So towards the end of this PowerPoint, there is I think it's the slide 16, resources for all. You'll see the link to the College and Career Ready IEP Family Engagement Live Binder. So the link is there, and once we get to the end, I can keep that up there for a while, and hopefully, Bonnie, do you think we could send that link out to people, maybe individually with the recording?
Yes, we'll do that.
Okay, okay. Because it's just a really nice live binder. It gets updated, and we update the links and things like that. So just know that that's available to anyone and everyone. So great question. All right. So with that, I'm going to move on to step 2. So identifying the effects of the disability. A disability-related need identifies why the student is not accessing, is not engaging, and is not progressing in the general education. The purpose of this step is to identify why a student has a disability and why the student may not be performing at grade level expectations. It really pinpoints the specific student needs in order to help the team identify the true focus of those annual goals. So examples of disability-related needs would include reading comprehension, maybe reading fluency, reading decoding, math fluency, math calculation, written expression, maybe post-secondary readiness and preparedness. That's more of a transition issue. Might be organization, articulation, or even sensory needs, okay? All preschoolers should be included in age-appropriate activities aligned with those Wisconsin Model Early Learning Standards, which we talked about in the live binder. So, so that's, that's part of the conversation as well. There is also a new prompt. So after you talk about disability related needs, there is a new prompt called the family engagement prompt. And that prompt in the IEP asks, how will the school engage the family in the child's education? Far too frequently, I see statements that the school will send out progress reports, on a quarterly or as a regular basis as regular grade reporting occurs. Far too frequently, I see family or school will send family links and newsletters on upcoming events. And so I see that on too many IEPs, and that tells me it's like one size fits all, because I see that far too often. And really, this particular prompt, the family engagement prompt, was really specific, was supposed to be specific to the needs of that student as well as the needs of that family. So it was supposed to be more of a unique identification of what that family might need. So an example is, for instance, if because of the student's disability, the family is asking for daily communication in regard to how the child's day went, and that will be in the form of a Google document. So it might be specific to maybe the parent is new to the school district, and maybe the parent is really looking to connect with other families. So the school could send information out to the family about other organizations, or maybe the district liaison, family engagement liaison that the district has, which is a trained parent to help support other parents. So this family engagement prompt was really to be focused on those unique needs of that family and that child. And so I'm going to move on to step 3. Step 3 is all about developing those goals. So disability-related needs are linked to annual measurable goals. So things to keep in mind, our goals will, number 1, address a disability-related need, and that includes a skill set that the team determines the student must develop. The goal will provide a baseline, so we need to define how the student is currently performing. So we're going to see that in the annual goal. It's going to state the expectation for progress in 1 year from now, okay? So that's our level of attainment. And that, as a team, admittedly, is our best guess, okay? So as a team, in 1 year from now, knowing where the student is at, where do we anticipate the student will be? And then sometimes annual goals may have those short-term objectives or benchmarks, but those are not required unless the student is using an alternative achievement standard, okay? The next thing is, how will goals be measured? And so we really want to define what the student will do, where and when, and to what level and degree. So that's how we want to be able to measure that goal. And then finally, progress reporting is the last bullet on here. And really that addresses how and when the parents will be informed of progress. And normally this is done using the same schedule that is used for all students in the district. So normally when grades are reported, if it's on a quarterly basis or trimester basis, that's typically when IEP goals are reported out on in that same way, unless there's a specific need to report more frequently, okay? And example of a goal, an annual goal that might require more reporting is sometimes a behavior goal. Depending upon what that goal is, it may require a little bit more monitoring and reporting that progress to families. It all depends. Most of them, though, do follow when grades are reported, so our annual goals, progress on annual goals are reported as well. All right. Step 4. Step 4 is about aligning services. So special ed services is the first bullet here, and this is what the student needs to access the general or special education, instructional services, related services, supplementary aids and services, program modifications and supports for school personnel. So that's what special ed services. It's everything in addition to what the student already gets in the general ed. This is additional services and supports that the student needs. The next bullet says participation in the general ed and physical education environment. So we really want to think about whether the student will participate full-time with non-disabled peers in a general education setting. And for preschoolers, that would be with non-disabled peers in age-appropriate settings. And number two, the IEP will summarize when and why. So when and why the student will be removed from non-disabled peers. So I am going to take you back out to the live binder, because now we've gone through step 1, step 2, step 3, and we're to step 4. So just to let you know, in step 2, the resources in here include the acronyms. The Parent's Guide to UDL is the new one here. And this is a wonderful resource that actually explains universal design for learning and talks about accessing materials, being able to communicate, to be able to share and express how you learn. So as it says here, multiple means of representation. So the what of learning, multiple means of action and expression. So how will the student be able to express they know and they're learning? And then multiple means of engagement. So this is when we're thinking about how different we all are, oftentimes understanding that we all have different ways of learning, and that kids, students with disabilities oftentimes have different ways of learning that work better for them, that we need to address and consider. So when we were looking at identifying the effects of the disability, keeping in mind universal design for learning and the different ways of what things are, the how of learning, the what of learning, and the why of learning. We also have the PTA Guides to Success, the model, Wisconsin Model Early Learning Standards, milestone moments, and the social emotional learning competencies as resources in here again. So that's step 2. Step 3, we have the Parent's Guide to UDL again. But we also have some new ones in here, and I really like these in here that I'm just going to call everyone's attention to. This checklist is from the Department of Public Instruction, and this is measurable annual IEP goals. So these are like questions IEP teams and staff could ask themselves when developing goals. And when I think about the family engagement process, the last one at the bottom here, when the parent reads the goal, will he or she be able to understand the area or skill being worked on? Where was the student at the start of the IEP? Where's that baseline? How much growth and progress the student is expected to make this year? What will be measured? And how and when will they get information about progress? So this is a really nice checklist for writing those goals and making sure that we could answer yes. When the parent reads this goal, they will be able to understand the area, the skill, where the baseline is, what progress is expected to be made, how it will be measured, and when they will hear from the school about the progress. There's also resources out here on annual goals. This is from the Parent Center Hub. And this is just a really easy to read resource. It's also available in Spanish. Okay, so that's out here. Wright's Law has their SMART IEPs. This is chapter 12 out of their book, and they've got examples in here about writing IEP goals. So that is included in here. Setting annual IEP goals, what you need to know. This is from understood.org. So another really nice resource. And then finally, understanding the standards-based IEP. And this is probably where a lot of families get confused because our child, for instance, if you have a 4th grade student but they're reading at a 1st grade level, but yet IEPs need to be written to standards, how do you make up for that 3-year difference? And is the child really learning what other 4th graders are learning and that type of thing? So there's a really nice resource here from the National Center for Learning Disabilities that is included under step 3, okay? And then finally, step 4, which is where we're at in our presentation. This one bulletin from the Department of Public Instruction is something that I think every parent and as well as IEP team members should tap into. This is an update bulletin from the Department of Public Instruction, and it does a really nice job of helping IEP teams and parents understand how supplementary aids and services and supports and accommodations can be written into the IEP. So starting on page 4 or 5, I should say, at the bottom of page 5, you'll see how special education service in daily and weekly allotments can be identified. And so while this is a few years old, the descriptions in here, sometimes it's hard to describe when that support or service will be provided. And this is a wonderful resource for helping IEP teams come up with the words and the descriptions for when especially an accommodation or a supplementary aid and support might be provided to that child under certain circumstances. So this is something I encourage everyone to kind of take a look at. And then oftentimes assistive technology and accommodations are part of this discussion when we're aligning services. So there's Reading Rockets has information on assistive technology. And also the Center for Technology and Disability. They have assistive technology in the IEP. So this is a really nice resource that if the student uses assistive technology, maybe it would be beneficial for the family to know more about this. And this is a really nice resource that could be shared. And then again, the Parent's Guide to UDL is in here as well, because we always have to keep in mind the how, the what, and the why of learning, okay? All right, so I'm gonna go back to the presentation. Step 5 is analyzing progress. Analyzing progress, the district will be collecting data throughout the IEP year, and progress is monitored regularly through formal and informal means. So all districts are required to assess student achievement. This includes all students, including those who are in special education. So examples of informal assessments would include class participation. Sometimes it's observation. And then there are formative assessments. It could be how they work in groups. They might have entrance and exit cards. Teachers might report on how they answer questions in class or peer interaction. And so typically informal assessments are done on a continuous basis. Formal assessments are typically graded assessments. On here, you'll see assessment participation is listed. And so specifically that talks about state and district-wide assessments. All children with disabilities are expected to participate in all general, state, and district-wide assessments. The team identifies the accommodations the student will utilize for all assessments for both state, district, and classroom. If the student does not participate in general education curriculum or aligned curriculum and participates in an alternative assessment, may be considered. Curriculum aligned with the alternative assessments achievement standards. This is typically reserved for students with more severe intellectual disabilities. What that means is they'll be taking a different statewide assessment compared to their peers. State assessments are for students in ages in grades, I should say, third grade through 11. In grades 3 through 8, students take the state exam. In grades 9 and 10, students take the ACT Aspire. And in grades 11, they take the ACT and Work Keys. So now with the current situation, a lot of the testing has been pushed aside. That's not something that's actually occurring right now. And districts are allowed to make local decisions regarding assessments, and district assessments may include any grade level. The one resource or the two resources that are linked in on this page are also linked into the live binder. These are the Andrew F. talking points and the Andrew F. worksheets. This, I think, is something every family could benefit from. So the Andrew F. resources. And so this is what this looks like. So this helps parents prepare for an IEP meeting by giving them some information about what services and supports in the IEP must help your child meet grade level standards, what that means. There are 8 different talking points. It gives some information in regard to the Andrew F. decision that was that went through our Supreme Court. And then it explains each one of these areas. So when we're talking about making progress and preparing for an IEP meeting, this is a really nice resource. And for families that want to do that kind of preparation before an IEP meeting, this would be a beneficial resource. Not all families are going to want this information. This one here too, this one is the second document, and this is actually the worksheet. So it helps families think about their child, list the areas where your child is below grade level, and why do you believe the IEP won't help your child reach grade level in this area. And then it has a suggested script as well. So this is a resource that it can be very beneficial in helping a family, especially a family who's struggling to see how their child is progressing, but doesn't know how to ask those questions or doesn't know how to think about or consider. How do I put that in words? How do I ask that question of school staff? Because I'm really concerned about my child. And so those are the types of parents that I oftentimes share this particular resource with, because they're just trying to find out, how can I best present that and ask the question so people understand what I'm thinking and what I'm saying. So I love this resource and I share it with you today. So those are our 5 steps. I just want to ask right now, before we go any further, does anybody have any questions with those 5 steps?
We don't have any questions at this time, Sherry.
Okay, excellent. So the last part of this presentation is just about, so for students ages 14 and older, we follow the same process, so it doesn't matter what age you are. The only thing is we do have the post-secondary transition plan, the PTP, that is developed as part of the IEP process, and at least one goal should be linked to the transition. Okay, so just some things to think about. Family engagement is really a parent-teacher collaboration that drives student learning and achievement. So just want to keep that in mind, that really the IEP process, when we have IEP meetings, are parents and teachers, and really family engagement is both the parent and the teacher collaborating together. This slide just kind of emphasizes the importance of parent involvement versus family engagement. Parent involvement is shown on the left, and the parents are sitting to the side watching the child. Family engagement is to the right, and there the parent is actively engaged in playing softball or baseball with their child. So engagement really is the parent being engaged with their child, with the school, and not merely just sitting by the sidelines. And so there's been that transition from parent involvement to family engagement. And I just wanted to just mention that really our parents have a much stronger role as a supporter of their child's learning at home, no matter what the family situation. All families are able to support their child. I also included some information because I knew there probably would be some school staff on this call or on this webinar as well. And I just wanted to bring some of Karen Mapp's work forward, that the joining process between schools and families by Karen Mapp are shown on this slide, and that really Karen Mapp found that high performing and low performing schools welcome, honor, and connect families with what's happening in class. And but all that, in order to link families to learning, we really have to start with first welcoming families into our schools and developing those relationships, honor those families to deepen those relationships, and then eventually linking families and connecting them to their child's learning. So there is a process. It's not easy. It takes time, but we're all in this together. And I just wanted to share that as well. So there are some things on here that I wanted to share. This is from Ann Henderson from the Annenberg Institute for School Reform. And this is through some of her research. And so this is what families want to know. So family engagement is a continuum, and the points listed on this slide represent that continuum. All families want to know what their children do in school, both academically, socially, and emotionally. We as parents want to know what our kids are doing well at. We want to celebrate their strengths and accomplishments. It's really important to us. Families want to know how math and reading is taught. School now is so much different from when we were children. Some families are focused on assessments and want to know more about their children and how their children are being assessed. Some families just want to know when testing will occur. So depending upon, some families want to know it all. Some families just want to know that my child is going to be tested from this day to this day. Most families have the ability to help their children at home. They just need some strategies and ideas from teachers. And teachers are encouraged to show families how to do these strategies. And finally, families want to know how we can actually help our child and how we can actually help the school help our child. This slide really speaks to communication. This is from Cadre, which is our National Dispute Resolution Center. And they have a handout that's called Engaging Parents in Productive Partnerships. And this comes directly from that particular resource. Ultimately, communication is key to relationship building. And so if you invest early in building trusting, working relationships with parents of students in your school, your contacts with each other will be transformed into more positive experiences. Mutually satisfactory interactions can create a shared history that you can draw upon to prevent disagreements and misunderstandings from escalating into conflict, allowing the time and space to find solutions to challenging situations. So there are things that we can do, that school staff can do, and this is from that resource, they encourage school staff to help people be at their best, to treat others with respect, to get to the bottom of the concern, and to listen deeply and demonstrate understanding. And I think many of our school staff do that, but I thought this was a really important resource when we're talking about family engagement. Sometimes these things, we're so focused on crossing T's and dotting I's that we forget about the relationship building. And then finally, what can families do? I wanted to make sure that I talked about not only what staff can do, but what families can do. So families, if this is your first IEP meeting, talk with others, okay? I have the IEP checklist. So that's one of the resources in my live binder too from Wisconsin Facets. And I know you guys have, if you've been through any of the other um, uh, presentations or webinars, the IEP checklist is something that Wisconsin Facets has a webinar on as well. So that is a key resource in here. I love that resource. We talked about the snapshots today, filling that out ahead of time. We talked about talking with your child, review the IEP, write down a list of questions you want to ask at the meeting, and then have positive conversations with your child's teachers before the IEP meeting. I know it takes time to make that call and to have some conversation, but it'll pay off big time if we as parents spend some time reaching out to school staff and have some positive conversations with our child's teacher ahead of time. Here's that live binder. So it can be found at www.livebinders, that's all one word, L-I-V as in Victor, E, B as in boy, I, N as in Nancy, D as in deer, ERS.com, / the letter B, / 2191148. So that's the live binder that has all those resources that we went out to today as we went through this webinar. And then finally, the last few slides are additional resources, websites, and other types of information that participants on today's webinar can access after this webinar. So, any questions?
I have one for you, Sherry, and the participant asks, what happens and what should you do if you continually get pushback from the school district when parents want to be engaged?
So that's a good question because parents have presented that many times before to me in the years that I've been doing this. So first, I would ask the parent, is the pushback from one individual or multiple individuals? Because and depending upon what that engagement is, that would be my other question. So depending upon how engaged and what that engagement looks like, it might be received by school staff as being too much, too heavy, maybe crossing the line into what the school is supposed to be doing. So there would be a lot of questions. So I would first talk with that parent and just kind of find out what the situation is. I'd want to know who the individuals are, which staff might be pushing back and for what reasons, if they've explained themselves or not. If it's individual school staff that you've talked with and you haven't been able to get anywhere, and your requests or your want for engagement is reasonable from your perspective, I would certainly take it to other people up the chain of command. So if you're working within an individual building, I would probably go to the principal. If the principal has already been engaged, I would go to the special ed director. So depending upon what the situation is, I would have some conversations about why you're getting pushed back. Sometimes we may be asking too much, that we want too much. And so what I recommend to families sometimes is to take a step back and maybe say, I can live with this, and not expect the 100%, maybe expect 75% or 50%. And then once you've kind of got school staff kind of okay with that, then asking for a little bit more. So sometimes it's being more strategic in how you approach, depending upon what the request is. So every situation is so different. And I will say every school district, as well as schools within school districts, are different.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you very much. We appreciate that. That is the only question that I have right now. If you have a closing statement, that would be great.
I would like to thank Wisconsin Facets for inviting me to share information in regard to the IEP process and family engagement. And I welcome any follow-up or questions from individuals that were on this presentation or listen to the webinar in the future. So thanks so much, Bonnie, and thank you, Wisconsin Facets.
Well, and thank you, Sherry, for a wonderful presentation today, filled with lots of information, and I'm sure that the participants will have an opportunity to be able to view also at a later time. So this concludes our webinar today. We'd like to thank everyone for joining us. Please be reminded that Wisconsin Facets has over 80 scheduled trainings and webinars for the year 2020. And please check out our website calendar and register for any of those upcoming trainings that may be of interest to you. Also, please watch for the short evaluation coming your way after the live presentation today. Everybody have a great day, stay well, and again, thank you, Sherry. Bye-bye for now.